Hello everybody, this is Thilo and I'll be your ClutterMeister for today. What is a ClutterMeister? Well, a decluttering expert really, but I find decluttering expert is a very clinical term for what I do and it doesn't cover the load quite as well as ClutterMeister. So what is it I do? I declutter, obviously. Clutter is anything that you don't need or that is useless. So decluttering by definition would be the act of taking everything out of a space that doesn't belong or isn't practical. Now, this is a good definition. It's a very practical and a very straightforward definition, but it's also a very restrictive one. Just imagine your wardrobe. Imagine you took anything out that is not practical or in use. Well, you'd end up with a big pile of stuff on the floor and a relatively empty wardrobe, but you'd also end up with a space that seems to develop a gravitational field of its own and attract all kind of stuff into it. Why? Because you've taken out a lot of stuff that in fact shouldn't have been taken out in the first place, because you have an emotional attachment to it and you weren't ready to take it out. You just took it out because there was a practical reason to do it. But the emotional brain hasn't caught up with you at that point. So what I believe is that we have to address the emotional reasons, the underlying reasons behind the presence of certain things in your space before we can actually take them away, in order to create an empty space that doesn't attract new stuff to start with. How do I do this? I provide an outsider's view. The outsider's view, I believe everybody has that, is that instinctive feeling when you walk into a space that you're not familiar with, where you walk in and you see certain aspects of that space that feel strange, or where you get the impression something is odd, like a piece of furniture that sits in the wrong place, or a pile of magazines sitting in the corner of the room on the floor, where they just jump at you, they jump out at you and you think, that's odd. And that's something you can only have if you walk into a space that you're not familiar with. Now, an inhabitant of that space will be very familiar with this. They will not be able to see this in the same way because they're used to it. So my job as a ClutterMeister is partly to provide that outsider's view and to convey the understanding that I gain from that outsider's view to the customer. How do I do this? By providing a safe space for them to discuss with me what they feel is the issue with their space, and giving me an opportunity to provide my insight into the space, thereby getting to a point where the customer might start to understand what the underlying reason is why things have accumulated. If we get to that point, and very often we do, it's time to go back to the practical side and make sure that we act on that understanding. If the customer, for example, realizes I've got 50 pairs of socks and I only ever wear 10 of them, there might be room for maneuver to say, well, maybe we've got too many socks. Maybe you can let go of some of these, thereby creating a space that is a natural space and not one that has been artificially created by taking out things that may not have belonged there in the first place, but that felt like they belong there. So this is one thing I provide. Another thing is that being an outsider, I'm not a family member, I'm not a friend. That gives me the opportunity to be very frank about what I tell my customer, without hurting them, obviously. But if I see something is clearly wrong in a space, I'm at liberty to say so, much more so than family members or friends. And because the customer has called me in the first place, they're also more likely to listen to what I say. They may not agree with it, but they're more open to listen. So there is this play between the practical side and the emotional side that I can work with. At the end of the day, we'll probably achieve much more than by simply taking stuff out of the space. And that is why I believe ClutterMeister fits the bill much better than Decluttering Expert. Now, if you find this interesting, please have a look at my website. You'll find a lot more information there and a blog with specific issues as well. I invite you to read those, and I hope you get something out of it. ClutterMeister, out.